let me tell you, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed. And they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them. But I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them.
This is Democracy Watch. Mark, that was Alan Dershowitz, who was Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer when he was back alive, claiming that there are documents, but they're being suppressed. And so I wanted to discuss with you this idea of if there is any information in the federal government that might be floating around, is there anything that could be in place that might prevent that information from being exposed to the public?
Sure. So, it's hard to know what to make of Alan Dershowitz or anything he said around this. But if in fact there is a court order, then there can be restrictions on what's released. I mean, we have seen lots of cases, some involving the current president when he was facing criminal charges, where things are under seal. Right. Remember, there was all that litigation in the Florida case where,
Right.
there was stuff that was confidential or classified. That's one reason why something might not be released. But judges can put things under seal more generally, even if it's not, classified, but that where there's a good reason. And then they're just not on the public record and the parties are not free to release them. Now, whether the Department of Justice could go back to a judge and say this should no longer be under seal, sure. And that would not be unusual for DOJ to do if DOJ wants it unsealed. Typically, judges are going to listen to DOJ because it's usually something is put under seal or kept under court order from being released to protect either one of the parties. In this case, Mr. Epstein is deceased, and so that would leave the Department of Justice, or because the department thinks that the release of it would be prejudicial to other cases or to the interests of the government. So it is possible. I don't know if it's true, but it is definitely possible. And then the keys would be in the hands of Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and people in her government.
So if I'm understanding, really the biggest impediment to releasing any information that may be under seal would be the DOJ itself. I mean, if this is kind of the thing, like if Pam Bondi, if this federal government, if the Trump administration wanted to do it, in theory, they would be able to at least make an effort to make that a reality. Is that correct?
Yeah, and they would be able to make it a reality. I mean, I don't want to put this hurdle up too tall. Okay, the DOJ, this is a closed criminal case. Okay, this is a case in which the Department of Justice holds all of the cards. The only person who would be able to express an opinion that would be contrary to theirs, like I said, is deceased. So if the Department of Justice said, we want to release all these files, whether they would have to go and get a box checked by a federal judge or not, I don't know. It would depend, but it wouldn't be a lot more than getting the box checked by a federal judge. I mean,
Right.
the Department of Justice holds all of the videotape of the jail, and that's totally up to them. They would have all of the records that they collected as part of the grand jury and criminal investigation. If there were any of those that were still subject to some seal order, they could get that lifted. If there were records that they had that were subject to some other settlement or whatever, again, same thing. And it is unlikely that there would be records in the possession of private parties that they wouldn't already have or couldn't get. So, I can already hear people saying, but what if it was part of a private settlement between the parties? Yeah, except a private party settlement can restrict documents from being in the possession of other private parties, but not the U.S. government. The U.S. government can always get access to those records.
So just as a general question here, if you do have an NDA that prevents you from being able to speak out about a topic, is the federal government able to come in and kind of like Bigfoot
Yes,
that NDA
absolutely.
and
Yeah, when people talk
compel the
about
release of information?
absolutely, when people talk about there being non-disclosure agreements, which is what an NDA is, let's say, you and your employer settle a claim or you just have an NDA at work, the Department of Justice can issue a grand jury subpoena and that supersedes any NDA, which is why I'm saying like there may be some boxes along the way that have to be checked because
Yeah.
that could be put under a protective order with what DOJ does with that information. But let's just assume for a moment a case goes to trial. then like that information will be heard in open court. Like, I mean, they may do some stuff to protect some names. We saw that actually in the criminal trial in New York involving Diddy, where there were some folks testifying under pseudonyms and the like. But again, that is all within the ambit of the prosecutor's office, right? If the prosecutor said we don't want there to be anonymity for this person testifying, like the DOJ, there wouldn't be anonymity. So Pam Bondi has all of the cards here.
Now, there has been a lot of focus on Pam Bondi. I might be alone in thinking this, but it seems so outside the realm of logic and possibility that Pam Bondi is where the buck stops in this situation. I understand she's the attorney general, she's at the top of the DOJ, but there is no daylight between her and Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump wants something done, he lets it be known. I mean, he went to the Department of Justice and railed against you, in front of these prosecutors. So the wall that would normally be erected between the executive branch or the presidency and the attorney general and the DOJ has been eliminated. And so if Trump wanted this to move forward, wouldn't it lend itself to reason that he's really where the buck stops and not necessarily Pam Bondi?
Oh, absolutely. And for two reasons, actually. One is the very practical reason that you just said, which is in this administration, Donald Trump has told Pam Bondi to do a lot of things, and she does them.
She does them, right.
And so if he said, release all of the records, not just some of the records relating to Jeffrey Epstein, like she would release all the records. So that's like the most direct reason. But there's actually a second reason, which is that where you have these closed criminal investigations, where you have deceased parties, presidents actually do that. I mean, there's been talk about that over the years about the release of the JFK files, right? And so, ultimately the president of the United States, where, it wouldn't really be interference in the traditional sense to order the release of a closed file.
Trump is doing it. Trump is at the same time that he's preventing or that we would assume he's preventing some release of these files that presumably he would have the authority to release. He's also ordering the release of the JFK files. So he's proving in real time that he has the authority to do it if he wants to.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, the president can always say to the attorney general, look, this is a historical matter. This is not, there's no ongoing criminal case, right? Jeffrey Epstein is dead.
Right.
JFK is, dead. Lee Harvey Oswald is dead. Like there is historical reasons why I, as president, think it is in the public interest to release these files. And sure, they would go through a classification review, but there's not going to be anything classified in the Jeffrey Epstein files.
Right.
And even if in a classified case, the president could waive the classification review, right? But so there's no reason why Donald Trump could not say to Pam Bondi, look, there's a lot swirling around this. And I think it is in the public's interest for them to have all the facts, and then it would all be laid out there in public. And that is both, like I said, because that wouldn't be that unusual. I mean, it's an unusual case for the president to have found interesting, but honestly, it was an unusual case for him to have found interesting when he was a candidate. So it would make sense for him to do it if that's what he wanted.
There was reporting today in Axios that suggested that Dan Bongino might be looking to resign, that he didn't come to work today on Friday as deputy director of the FBI. That reporting was confirmed by CNN, which said that in fact they have heard from their sources that Dan Bongino is looking to resign amid the fallout from all of the Epstein stuff. And so, can I have your reaction just in general to the Bongino of it all, because this was somebody who predicated so much of his identity, so much of his brand on talking about this issue in particular. And of course, now you've got that guy, really that at least to his audience seems like the very deep state that he spent so long castigating when he was just a podcast host.
Yeah, look, there are two levels of question here, right? The first is, did he feel like things he said before he was in government were overly aggressive and not borne out by the facts? And does he now feel the need to resign for that. That strikes me as remarkably improbable. I mean, this is an administration full of people who said the most irresponsible things when they were not in government.
Right.
And they are not like the kind to now be like, oh my God, I was wrong, so I must resign in shame.
Right.
Like, this is an administration without shame. So I don't think that's it, right? But that would be like, the one possibility. The other is that, he staked a lot of credibility on this. You have the Attorney General saying that she is reviewing files, including a client list on her desk, and now she's saying it doesn't exist.
Right.
I don't know whether it exists or doesn't exist. There is a suggestion I saw in the media that there might be a gap in some of the videotape, and that there might be metadata to suggest that the videotape of the jail cell or the prison,
was
that
manipulated.
There were some
Yeah.
manipulator or there are alterations to. And he may just say, you know what, like, I didn't sign up for this because I can't square what is not coming out with what I said needs to come out.
Right.
Now, that would also suggest that there is some, shred of integrity in a weird way. So I don't know whether to credit that either. But I will say that, the administration had an opportunity, if there was no there, to very clearly put to rest that there was no there. And right. They have managed to either be the most incompetent people at putting to rest a rumor, or there is some weird thing that is out right. there that they don't want to release. I mean, the president interjecting himself. I don't know if you saw the video of this the other day.
Let's throw to that video.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
Okay, that's just like bizarre. I mean, it's bizarre behavior by this president to act that way. I mean, it's contrary to the way he has talked about this issue before, and it seemed, out of character.
Well, and also for Donald, just as a quick aside, for Donald Trump, like, as if he's the guy that doesn't want to relitigate topics. We've been talking about crooked Hillary for the better part of a decade. We've been talking about the Biden crime family for the last, 5-6 years. We've been talking about the water pressure and showers and toilets since the day he came onto the national scene. That guy doesn't want to relitigate all topics. This is the king of repetition. All of a sudden, 5 minutes into the Epstein saga, he's like, why are we still talking about this? To your point, doesn't exactly comport with his past behavior.
Yeah, look, and if you just to put my cards on the table, if I had to guess, and I just want to be clear, I don't know anything more than what you know. If I had to guess, like, the way you make sense of all of this is that, the Biden administration said, look, the guy committed suicide, and that's the beginning and end of the story, because the Biden administration were filled with adults who were like worrying about war and peace around the world, and we're not interested in furthering discussion of a single criminal case in America with someone who had killed himself.
Yeah.
But that is different than the level set that the Trump administration came in, which is, are we going to release all the records? And I kind of doubt that they've released all the records.
Yeah.
I think that the Biden world was like, well, why would we release all the records? This is a closed criminal case.
Right. But to your point, the Biden administration was not filled with a bunch of podcast hosts who staked all of their credibility on releasing all of the records.
Right. And Merrick Garland never said, I have all the records sitting on my desk and I'm going to review them and release them.
Right.
But I suspect, based on the way people are behaving, is that there is something in some records that is profoundly disquieting or embarrassing for someone in the Trump administration, or for their supporters, or for something. And they've just decided not to release it. And maybe Dan Bongino, that's just too far from. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, look, something tells me that given the legs that this story has, this is not the last that we'll be speaking about the Epstein of it all. So if there's any updates, we'll of course cover it. For those who are watching, very important, if you're not yet subscribed to Democracy Docket's YouTube channel, that is the best way to support Mark and his team right now, gives them a bigger megaphone so that they can reach more people. And when people come onto YouTube or any of the social media platforms looking for news, subscribing to Democracy Docket will make it so that you're not immediately filtered to right-wing content. The bigger Democracy Docket can grow, the more folks will be filtered to accurate, factual information, and that's what we need, especially in this digital media ecosystem. So again, I'll put the link to Democracy Docket's YouTube channel right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.